What we'll be trying to do is to find something that will give us a positive idea.
The boxes are on the rack, just inside. It's like it was made for it.
Plates, bottles, stuff everywhere.
This is the sweetest part of all, the amount of work that we've put into this, the whole team.
The families were alone, and that's all the families from this disaster.
I'm actually going to go down and see firsthand the ship that my great-grandfather went down on.
I knew then that I'd never see my father again.
We're here today to remember 17 crew members who lost their lives on this exact location.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
Today what we're doing is we're out testing the boat. We're on a Whittley SL22 with a Volvo Penta V6 diesel motor in them, which has been donated to the project by Aqua-Power Marine of Seaford. This is a brand new boat that they've given to the project, and this is the official search boat that we'll be using. What we're looking for is a 6-inch shell. It's 6 inches in diameter, it's 18 inches long and weighs about 40 kilos. We went over to the museum at Queenscliff and we met with Keith Quinton, and he was able to walk us through how he did his research, and we've discussed with him the likelihood of where the shell would be. And it is in fact Keith Quinton's information that has led us to believe that this is the spot where the shell is. We are investing a lot of time, but we're telling the story that the first shot fired by the Allied forces in World War I was fired right here, Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. And I think that's a great story, and I think it's a story that needs to be told, because to pull this off is going to be a long shot. But I believe we've got a team that's dedicated enough to see the project through, and if anyone can do it, I think it's the guys from Southern Ocean Exploration. In Melbourne in 1914, on the 5th of August, the German ship, the Pfalz, which was a 6,500 tonne ship, was tied up at Victoria Dock. Fully aware at the time of the situation in Europe, Captain Kerr Hyken attempted to load enough coal onto his ship so as that would allow him to escape into friendlier waters. But not only was he loading coal onto the ship, he was dumping cargo from the ship onto the dock because he was trying to get rid of the weight and get rid of the load. To clear Port Phillip Heads, Captain Kerr Hyken needed to obtain an exit clearance. All efforts were made by the inspection party to delay the issuing of the clearance. So everybody knew that war was being declared, however it hadn't been declared. This is 1914, this is the gentleman's war, so everything had to be done right. Captain Kerr Hyken was insistent that permission be given. He was keen to get out. He knew that he needed to get out. He knew that they were stalling, and he was pushing the inspection party to allow him to get out. So most of you guys here would, obviously as divers, are familiar with Port Phillip Bay and the track that he would have had to take. So he was up in the Port of Melbourne. He would have gone all the way down south to the Hovel Light, which is the entrance to the South Channel. He's entered into the South Channel and he's got to Portsea. The inspection party boarded the ship in Portsea. Exactly where, we don't know. So Sanford, who was in charge at Fort Queenscliff, gave the order to Lieutenant Morris, he was the fire commander at Fort Nepean, to either stop or sink the ship. At the time, it was Queenscliff were in control. They issued the orders over to Portsea. So Morris raised the signal by flag for the Pfalz to stop. Morris was hesitant to fire the shot. He didn't want to fire at a ship without getting further clarification. And it was Veal that insisted that Morris give the command. Now Veal was a 27-year-old signalman at the time, and he was adamant, fire the shot, fire the shot. We've got the permission, you need to fire the shot. Now the Pfalz ignored the signal. Now even the pilot, Captain Robinson himself, did say that they did not see the signal. So the Pfalz is heading out of Port Phillip Bay, and ultimately it's not going to stop, and they knew at the fort, they could tell by the wake of the ship that it wasn't slowing down. So they fired what's known as a heave-to shot from gun B1, which is a 6-inch Mark 7 gun. They fired across the bow from Fort Nepean. The heave-to shot is a special shell that's designed to make a loud bang when it's fired and a big splash when it hits the water. It is this shell that's our target, and this has been recognised officially as the first shot fired by the Allied forces in World War I. This is just an artist's impression of the ship, so it's heading out through the heads. Fort Nepean's to the top of the page, Queenscliff's to the bottom, and you can see the splash. That landed exactly where it was supposed to land, right in front of the ship. Robinson, the pilot, said that when the shell hit the water, that the splash was so big that everyone on the bridge got wet from it. The guys firing this shell, they were gunners. It was their job to fire the gun. That's what they did day in, day out. They practiced this day in, day out. In one of the reports that I read, it said that they could sever a tow line between two ships. That's how accurate these boys are with their guns. The pilot, Captain Robinson, then put the telegraph into full astern. Kerr Hyken took control of the bridge, the captain, and put it in full steam ahead. Several reports that we've read says a scuffle broke out on the bridge. We don't really know whether this is true or not, but I've left it in because I think it makes a good part of the story. So we don't really know exactly what the interaction between the captain and the pilot was. However, ultimately, Kerr Hyken takes control, puts the ship in full steam ahead. Robinson, the captain, convinces Kerr Hyken, if you do not stop this ship, the next shell is going to sink you. And it absolutely would have, because the next shell was already in the gun and it was ready to fire, and it was going right at the bridge of the ship. Keith Quinton is the author of the book Stop the Faults 1914, the first British Empire action of World War I. Keith did some impeccable research to write this book, and we have met with Keith. We didn't think that we were going to be able to improve on the research that Keith Quinton had done. So we've taken his research, and we're actually taking Keith Quinton as well, because we've got him on board with the project. And it's his research that is going to determine where we run our search. Terry Cantwell is from Whitewater Documentaries and happens to be standing up the back of the room with David Muir, his partner in Whitewater Documentaries. They've been following Southern Ocean exploration for the past 5 years, filming and documenting everything we do, and as you can see, they're here tonight. They are the producers of the TV series Ghost Divers, which I'm really hoping you guys are going to see on your TV in the not too distant future. Southern Ocean Exploration is the most successful shipwreck hunting team in Australia. It's headed up by myself. It's made up of volunteers, of researchers, technical divers, historians. It's made up of whoever wants to be a part of it and whoever wants to donate their time. And we have decided that we are going to donate all our efforts, put all our efforts into looking for this shell. So the challenge. On the 5th of August 1914, there were no records kept. And in fact, this photo that I said to you earlier on is the official photo of the first shot fired. Wasn't taken until a couple of days after. And we know it wasn't taken for a couple of days after because the dress uniform they're wearing, they didn't have on the day. We have a list of the names of the guys that fired the shot. I think there's about 3 guys in the photo that weren't there, and there's about 3 guys that were there that aren't in the photo. I was saying before that we're using Keith Quinton's research. Well, there have been several different accounts put forward over the years as to what happened. There were no accurate records at the time kept, so everything was done after the fact. Commander Ron Veal is the guy that Keith Quinton feels has the best story, that his is the most credible and his is the one that aligns in the most areas. So it's his statement and his I guess events that happened on the day is what Keith Quinton's based his research on, so that's what we're basing our search on. Commander Veal, although he was only a signalman at the time, actually boarded the fault in his role as a signalman. There have been many claims that the shell has already been found. With these shells, there were hundreds of them made. Prior to the start of the war, 6-inch shells were made with an explosive product called lyddite. And lyddite was a very unstable, unforgiving explosive. And there have been several accounts of the lyddite exploding as they loaded the shell into the gun. There was a shell found by some divers earlier this year, and they brought up and claimed to have found the shell. And we know it's not the shell, and we know it's not the shell for a couple of reasons. This picture on the left here shows the firing band, okay? And now what happened was that is a copper band at the base of the shell, and when the shell is exploded out of the gun barrel, the rifling of the barrel leaves an indent here in that copper base. So if it doesn't have the rifling indent, then we know that the shell wasn't fired, that it's just been dumped, yeah? That's the first reason why we know that that's not one of the shells. The second reason that we know it's not one of the shells is if you look at the nose of the shell, it's empty. Well, the shells that were fired had a detonator screwed into them. You can see, if you look at that closely, maybe you can't see, there's a bit of thread there. So they would screw the detonator into the shell. Now, depending on the type of detonator that they screwed into the nose of the shell, would depend on how the shell reacted once it was fired. So they could screw in an armour-piercing detonator that would, when it hit the ship, would penetrate into the ship and explode on the inside of the ship. If they wanted it to explode just outside the ship, they could screw in a timer detonator, and they could set the time, because they knew exactly how many seconds the shell was going to be in the air, and they could get it to explode at a given time. If they didn't want it to do either, which is what our shell was going to do, because they didn't want the shell to explode, they just wanted it to make a big splash, they just capped the shell and they screwed in a cap. So depending on what the shell was required to do, depended on what went into the nose. If it has nothing at all and it doesn't have the driving band marked, then we know that the shell was just dumped. So this is what a 6-inch shell looks like. That piece of paper is a piece of A3 paper. So that gives you a bit of an indication of the size of the shell. It's 6 inches in diameter, it's about 18 inches long, and it weighs exactly 40 kilos. And I know it weighs exactly 40 kilos, and I'm sorry about changing from pounds to kilos, but when I weighed it on the scales only read out in kilos. So we physically weighed it, and it's 40 kilos. So this is what the shell's going to look like after about 70 to 90 years under the water. So it's going to have deteriorated quite a bit. However, it's still going to be recognisable as a 6-inch shell. And you can tell by this one that it doesn't have the marks on the driving band. The shell on the right is our shell. That's the one that we're looking for. And you can see here on the left here, this is the lyddite that was dropped down into the shell. And down below that is what they call the percussion or the detonator, and that is then screwed into the shell. And again, that determines how the shell reacts once it's been fired. So our challenge is, well, obviously to find the shell. So we're basing everything that we do on Keith Quinton's work. Because as I said, he has done such a fantastic job of researching it. There is nothing that we can come up with, that we feel we can come up with, that's going to improve on the research. So we're going ahead with it based on Keith's work. And this is where he's told us in triangular A is where he feels that the shell is going to be. Triangle B is where the second shot would have ended had they have fired the second shot, we think. There's no doubt that the shell's going to be buried under the sand, yeah? So what we have done is we've used maps like this, and this is the military practice chart from about 1918 onwards. So we know the range that the guns could fire, we know the angle that the guns could fire. And again, this is all made up a part of the research. However, if the shell is there, and if it is under the sand, which we believe it will be, we are not going to find it by swimming around looking for it. We're going to need some fairly heavy equipment. And Geometrics make a G882 marine magnetometer. And this is the same magnetometer that they are using in Pearl Harbor to find unexploded ordnance. This magnetometer, when set up correctly and not on its own, in tandem with several other units, can find a 22 calibre shell a metre under the sand. So it's a fairly impressive piece of equipment, and we believe that the shell cannot be found without it. I think the chances of the shell just sitting nicely on the bottom are fairly remote. So if we are to find this shell, we need to purchase this piece of equipment. The total cost of this piece of equipment is about $135,000. The unit itself is about 85,000 US. Then we've got to freight it here. We've got to cover the cost of the training. We've got to buy the software that goes with it, pay any import duties, etc., etc. So we feel that we need about $135,000 to get the project off off the ground. We need to get people to make donations towards the cause, because if we don't get at least $85,000 to purchase the magnetometer, we are not even going to attempt to go out on the water and search for it, because we just don't think it's achievable. We have had quite a bit of support already. Aqua-Power Marine is a company down in Seaford, have donated a $150,000 boat. They've built a brand new boat. They put a Volvo Penta motor in it, and they are giving us this brand new boat. Tomorrow we get it, and that's going to be, they've named it Project Longshot, and that's the boat that we're going to use. Real-time learning is an educational system that's been implemented at Mount Eliza High School, and there are 40 kids at Mount Eliza High School that have got right behind this project. Omni Graphics have donated the banner and the pull-up banner here, also some bumper stickers, and they're getting behind the project, and they're donating all our advertising for free, trying to help the project get up. Whitewater Documentaries is Dave and Terry down the back. They're donating all their time, all their resources. They are making whatever videos I need. The boys jump in and they just make it, and they give it to me to allow me to do presentations like this. INTD Australia has been a huge supporter of Southern Ocean exploration. Justin McCarthy makes his boats available to us whenever we're going out to do searching or diving. This is actually in Port Phillip Bay, which isn't really our area where we normally work. We do normally operate out of Western Port, which is where Justin's boats are. However, I know if we were to ask him to bring the boat around, he would be more than too happy to do it. We actually have a magnetometer, and our magnetometer will find a 500-ton ship in 100 metres of water, no problem at all. But this is a special piece of equipment, and it's going to take training, for us to learn how to use it. And then what happens is, once we tow it, unlike our own magnetometer, what we need to do is we need to load this on to a computer, ship it off to the States, and then the States analyse it, and then they come back and they will tell us in that given area how many 40 kilo 6-inch shells there are.
We were going to give you this bottle of wine, but I feel now that I'll probably have to keep it for myself, because by the time you share it out with everyone, there'll be almost none there. So
Oh, none of those guys drink.
Oh, okay.
They're all teetotalers, yeah. I only work with teetotalers, but yeah.
All right.
I'll
Thanks,
thank you
Mark.
very much.
Absolutely fantastic.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Hey, guys, make sure you
Hi, I'm Mark Ryan from Southern Ocean Exploration, the most successful shipwreck hunting team in Australia.
I'm Martin Tozer, marine archaeologist with SOE.
Somewhere out there lies the first Allied shot fired in the Great War.
In the early morning of August the 5th, 1914, in a desperate attempt to escape Australian authorities, the German freighter Fels was steaming towards Port Phillip Heads in order to escape before World War I was declared. There was a shot fired across the bows of the Fels, which turned out to be the first British Empire shot fired in World War I. Southern Ocean Exploration has been given the job to find that shell. Now the shell is only 6 inches in diameter and about 18 inches long. So out there, it's going to be a very difficult job to find it without sophisticated equipment.
In order to find the shell, we need to purchase some specific equipment. The cost of this equipment is $130,000.
What we're looking for is a transverse gradient magnetometer, which measures the Earth's magnetic surface, and it can pick up objects as small as this shell.
If we were to find this shell, not only would it have an Australian significance, but an international significance as well. That's why we're so excited about this project.
I'm David Muir from Whitewater Documentaries. We've been following SOE for the last 5 years, documenting their discoveries.
SOE's discoveries are casting new light on some little-known areas of Australian history. We will document the project every step of the way, not only recording the story of the shell and the discovery of the shell, but we will also be looking at the story of the felts and the implications for Australian history.
Over the last decade, SOE has found many significant shipwrecks along the Victorian coastline. This by far is our biggest challenge. And with the 100-year anniversary coming up of that shot being fired, we really need your support to get there. Thank you.